who were born with a rare metabolic disorder, and each of them lived only 6 months.
For decades, Nancy Guthrie has been known as a voice of calm wisdom and unwavering faith. Her books, sermons, and interviews have guided countless families through grief, heartbreak, and moments of spiritual doubt. She has always been the rock for others, a steady presence who listens, comforts, and inspires. But what happens when the quiet strength you rely on faces an unexpected storm in its own home? Recently, Nancy's family experienced something so shocking, so raw, that it left them reeling and questioning everything they thought they knew. It wasn't a public scandal. It wasn't a financial crisis or a medical emergency. It was something far more intimate, words spoken by her daughter that changed the family's world in an instant. Simple words, yet profound. Honest words, carrying a truth that could not be ignored. What she said shook Nancy to her core, forcing her to confront emotions and realities she had long held at bay. In the coming minutes, we'll explore the story behind those words, the ripple effect on her family, and how one honest statement revealed more than anyone expected. It's a story about love, trust, and the delicate balance of family bonds, a reminder that even the strongest households can face moments that leave them completely unprepared. Stay with us as we uncover the moment from the outside. Nancy Guthrie's life seemed picture perfect. A respected author, speaker, and mentor, she had spent decades guiding others through grief, loss, and spiritual struggles. Her calm demeanor and thoughtful words had touched thousands, and those who knew her admired the way she managed to balance her public life with her role as a mother and wife. But behind closed doors, life was far more complex than anyone could see. Like all families, the Guthries had their challenges, unspoken tensions, and moments of quiet strain. What no one expected was that a single conversation with her daughter would suddenly expose emotions that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. The evening began like any other. Nancy had just finished a long day of writing and preparing a sermon for a small local gathering. Her daughter, whose voice would soon carry a message that shook the household, was sitting across from her in the living room. They were talking about ordinary things, school projects, family schedules, but something in the air felt different that day. Then, without warning, her daughter spoke words that were honest, piercing, and completely unexpected. It wasn't a complaint, nor was it a revelation of rebellion. It was a confession, one that revealed fears, doubts, and feelings Nancy hadn't realized her child had been carrying. At first, Nancy was stunned. She could barely respond, her mind racing to process what she had just heard. She felt the familiar instinct to offer comfort and reassurance. But this time, the words she wanted to speak weren't enough. This wasn't about fixing a problem or correcting a behavior. It was about truly listening, without judgment, to the voice of someone she loved deeply. Her daughter's honesty demanded a level of attention and vulnerability that Nancy had rarely experienced, even with the people she thought she knew best. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that this was more than a fleeting moment. It was a turning point, a shift in the family's dynamic that would ripple through their daily lives. Nancy realized that understanding her daughter required setting aside her own assumptions, fears, and preconceptions. She had spent her life guiding others toward truth, comfort, and faith. But now she was learning a lesson she hadn't anticipated. The courage to speak and the courage to listen often come at the same time, and both are essential for genuine connection. By the end of that evening, the household was quiet, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a newfound sense of openness and honesty, tinged with the vulnerability that only comes when deep truths are finally acknowledged. Nancy Guthrie's family had entered a new chapter, not defined by scandal or tragedy, but by the raw, human power of one daughter's words. That moment would shape how they related to one another, how they communicated, and how they faced challenges in the future. It was a reminder that even families admired for their strength are still deeply human, with emotions, fears, and truths waiting to be spoken. The days following that conversation were some of the most reflective in Nancy Guthrie's life. She found herself replaying her daughter's words over and over, analyzing the meaning, the courage behind them, and the honesty that had pierced the usual calm of their home. What made the moment so impactful wasn't that it revealed wrongdoing or conflict, it was that it exposed a layer of emotional truth that Nancy had never fully recognized. She realized that her daughter's words were not just about a single event. They were about feelings that had been quietly accumulating over months, even years. Waiting for a safe space to be expressed. Nancy had always prided herself on understanding people, especially children. But this experience reminded her that no amount of observation or guidance could replace the power of genuine communication. She began to see her daughter in a new light, not as the child she had always guided, but as an individual with her own perspective, fears, and insights. Every word spoken during that conversation seemed to carry layers of meaning, revealing the depth of her daughter's thoughtfulness, resilience, and longing to be truly heard. The family dynamic began to shift subtly but noticeably. Nancy's husband, who had witnessed the conversation from another room, also recognized the gravity of the moment. They both realized that the household's foundation of love and trust was strong, but it needed reinforcement through openness and attentiveness. Instead of dismissing the words as a passing phase or minor complaint, they chose to embrace them, to explore the underlying emotions together. This period also forced Nancy to confront her own assumptions about parenthood, communication, and vulnerability. For someone who had spent decades counseling families on grief and faith, she now faced the intimate reality of living those lessons herself. It was a humbling and, in many ways, transformative experience. She began to understand that guidance doesn't always come from books or sermons. Sometimes, it comes from listening carefully to the people you love and allowing them to teach you about honesty, courage, and trust. Friends and close family who later learned about the conversation expressed surprise at how much impact one conversation could have. But for Nancy Guthrie, it was a moment that redefined her role not only as a mother but as a partner, mentor, and human being navigating the complexities of relationships. That evening, her daughter's simple but profound words set in motion a series of reflections, changes, and deeper connections that would shape the Guthrie family for years to come. In learning to listen, Nancy discovered a renewed sense of closeness and authenticity with her daughter that she had never experienced before. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of that conversation continued to resonate through the Guthrie household. Nancy Guthrie noticed subtle changes, not dramatic shifts, but quiet adjustments in the way her family communicated. Her daughter, once hesitant to share deeper feelings, now spoke more openly about hopes, frustrations, and fears. There was a newfound honesty in the home that hadn't existed before, a recognition that emotions, when expressed, could actually strengthen rather than weaken relationships. Nancy began keeping a personal journal during this time, something she rarely did outside of professional reflections. She wrote down her thoughts about the conversation, her daughter's bravery, and the ways in which she could support her child more effectively. It became a tool for self-reflection, a way to process not only her daughter's words but also her own reactions. She realized that her initial shock had been replaced by admiration and a renewed sense of responsibility, not as a disciplinarian, but as a listener, a guide, and a partner in her daughter's emotional journey. Even the smallest family interactions were colored by this new openness. Dinner conversations that used to focus on schedules or homework now included moments of sharing personal feelings. Nancy's husband noticed that the household felt lighter, even as the discussions sometimes became intense and challenging. This was no longer about surface-level compliance or polite exchanges. It was about understanding each other's inner worlds. In these moments, the family discovered the fragile but transformative power of honesty, and the courage it took to speak and listen without judgment. At the same time, Nancy struggled with her own vulnerabilities. She had spent decades offering comfort to others. Yet her daughter's words reminded her that even the strongest guidance does not shield anyone from the complexities of human emotion. She realized that being a mother or parent in general requires constant learning, adaptability, and the humility to acknowledge that you don't always have all the answers. Nancy Guthrie understood that listening deeply could be more powerful than speaking, and that allowing her daughter to express herself fully was a gift, not a threat. By the end of this period, the Guthries had begun to experience a subtle but profound shift in their family culture. Conversations became richer, relationships deeper, and the emotional bonds stronger. What started as a single moment of honesty had grown into a broader lesson in empathy, patience, and unconditional support. Nancy Guthrie had faced a moment that could have caused tension or division, but instead it became an opportunity for growth for both her daughter and herself. And in this transformation, The family discovered that sometimes the most ordinary words spoken in courage and love can change everything. In the months that followed, the conversation that had once shocked Nancy Guthrie's family became a reference point for growth, understanding, and deeper connection. What had started as a moment of vulnerability evolved into a lasting change in how the family related to one another. Nancy noticed that her daughter carried herself with more confidence, feeling secure that her voice mattered. The household, once guided mostly by routine and expectation, now operated with empathy at its core. For Nancy, the experience reinforced lessons she had always taught publicly but rarely experienced so intimately. She realized that faith, love, and guidance are not just about providing answers, they are about creating spaces where honesty is welcomed. Emotions are validated and connections are strengthened. Her daughter's words had reminded her that even those who seem strong, steady, or wise are constantly learning, and that true resilience comes not from control, but from openness. Family, friends, and colleagues later remarked on the subtle but noticeable transformation. Nancy's husband described a home filled with laughter, heartfelt discussions, and an ease that hadn't been there before. The family had discovered that listening carefully, without judgment, could unlock a depth of trust and understanding that no amount of planning or guidance could achieve. The daughter's courage had become a catalyst, showing that the strength of a family lies not only in shared values but also in the freedom to speak openly and be heard. Ultimately, the story of Nancy Guthrie's family serves as a powerful reminder that even the strongest households are built on moments of vulnerability. One simple conversation, grounded in honesty and love, had the power to shift perceptions, deepen relationships, and change the way a family interacts forever. It proved that sometimes the words that shock us the most are the very words that have the power to heal, connect, and transform. And in the quiet of that home, the Guthries had discovered something invaluable: the courage to speak, the patience to listen, and the love to grow together as a family stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before.